So what we want at this stage is a block-in, a broad sense of lights and darks in the correct place, the drawing good, the sort of image that we could step maybe 20 foot back from and say, oh yeah, that looks a little like, or pretty much like the photo. So the next stage is I'm going to flesh this thing out. I'm going to break apart this mass, maybe in the boat and other areas, and make it look a lot more lifelike, a lot more varied. But I want to keep the overall value pretty much predominantly the same. So the boat is probably the most complicated section. So I'm going to go in with the dark brush. Let's look at the side of the boat, and we can see that it reads as a blue boat. Okay, so I'm going to take a little bit of my dark blue paint, introduce it into the boat. It might not make hardly any difference at all. It might just push it slightly if you add enough paint towards the blue. It's not a really critical thing by any means, okay? Now let's go up. We've got a dark brown section along here, which would work, I think, just perfectly fine with the purple. And then we have a lighter stripe. Now I don't need to remix colours. I can come in for that lighter lilac that we made earlier, and I'm going to push that in here. Now the reason we can work wet in wet with this is it's all in the same colour field. It's all in the shadows, in the purples, whereas here we're going at opposite ends of the colour wheel. We're going from blue to orange. So that's why we left a barrier there, but it's not so important here. Let's come up onto the top of the boat, possibly the most complicated little section here. You can see on the top, it's still fairly dark. Let's look at the darkest section. So we've got a dark line here. We've got a dark line coming across here. Are there any more? There's quite a dark aspect to that face of the boat, the same as this face, the one that's looking towards us. We can see some trace of that lattice work of slats inside the boat, so we can just create an impression of this rather than trying to overwork it. What else is happening? Well, can you see that this section of the boat, this colour here, it's lighter than this. What's happening is it's facing the sky, so it's picking up a little bit of the sky colour. So what we do is take our dark purple, add a little bit of our sky colour to it, and we should get a value that's in between the boat and the sky, still reads as darker than the water, but it looks like it's picking up some light from the sky. We can do the same for the slats that we sit on. I'm sure there's a technical term for them. No doubt someone will fill me in on that. And then for the lattice work on the inside, we can see it's picking up little bits of light again in the purple. Okay, so these are all cool colours. Even though there's a little bit of light, there's a sense of light on them, they're not directly picking up the orange, except for the ones in this section here. So for this, I'm not going to go for my orange brush because I don't want to contaminate it. It's still orange, but it's quite subtle. So I'm going to pick up some orange paint with that same brush and just introduce them in, and they should just read as orange but also blend in slightly so they're not as bright as the strongest lights. I'd be fairly happy with that boat at this stage. Just one last little thing. We can see the end of the boat is picking up orange light from the lamppost up there. I'm quite happy with that. I'm going to go on now and get some of these other complex little shapes here. So let's look at the signs. This one here is possibly a little light, so I'm just going to come in and darken it down a little bit. Again, all in the blue, so it doesn't matter putting wet paint over existing paint. If you look at these uprights, you can see they're quite dark down towards the bottom. As they come up, they're picking up orange. Now, not the lightest orange, but our darkest orange. It's all about picking an appropriate value. So here and here we wanted an orange, but nowhere near as light as the source of that orange light. There are some rocks at the back here. And let's look for where else we see these dark little accents. Well, they're coming out across here. We've got a dark accent across here. We've also got some dark on the face of this rock here. So they're important areas. They're not precise areas. They can be quite difficult because they have shapes, but not very definite shapes. We have another dark mass just there, but they make a big difference to your painting. Now let's go on to the next post or sign. We can see there are very dark poles on this one. Okay, I won't worry too much about the writing on there for the moment. Just tone that down a little bit. And really it's just a process of working through that whole section of detail, picking up little variations. Let's go on to the larger masses now. We've got a few of them. So maybe let's look at the harbour to start with. I've got purple here, I've got orange there. I need to create some sort of transition in between. And really it's a sort of what I call a fuchsia colour. So it's purple, sorry, it's the alizarin with a little touch of the orange. And I'm just going to join those two sections. Do you remember we left a barrier? Now, what I'm doing is I'm not contaminating this pure orange and I'm not contaminating this lovely purple down here. I'm simply joining the two up, and the effect is quite considerable when you create that gradient between the two. Suddenly they both colours appear more intense. Okay, and we can take that on up. Now I'm going to use my cleaner brush for the transition between the two oranges. Maybe filling this one in a little bit sharper. We've got a little bit of negative space here to work on. So not painting the boat, but painting the harbour behind the boat. Okay, that's starting to look a little more alive. Now for the mountain in the distance, I want to create a small sense of aerial perspective there. It's quite easily done. All I do is I take some of the atmosphere, which is the sky, and introduce it into that dark mass. Just a small amount, and you'll see it pushes it back and kind of integrates it into the landscape a little better. Now, not going too severe on this, just a little touch. The next stage is I'm going to fill in that sky a little bit better, working on the edge. So a soft scumbled edge, filling in the gaps of bare canvas. Now let's look at that sky overall. Does it change? Yes, it gets lighter over towards this area. It's the same. Does the same happen in the water? Yes, it's darker here than there. So it makes sense to do the same with the water. Fill it in. Careful that we don't pick up bits of orange contaminating our paint. So this is why I'm turning the brush, and as I pick up contaminated paint, it gets pushed to the other side of the brush. And then let's lighten the paint somewhat. So let's just pop a little bit more white into that. And we'll go back the way. So we're creating a gradient similar to what we did down at on the harbour. Now resist the urge to work that paint too much and create a nice soft finish. We can do that later on. Maybe a little more white into that. And what will happen is we can create a negative shape around the boat, which will really make that stand out as well. Now all that's left at this stage is to replicate what I did here with the rest of the lights. So side of the brush, just gently work those two areas together, being very careful not to bring the purple right into the center of that. The same here. Here the brown background is really working well because it creates a natural barrier between the purple and the orange. Just the bare canvas works quite well. And that's enough for stage 2.